Shame and guilt are a heavy burden that can weigh us down and make us all feel like we are drowning. And if you feel that, if that resonates with you, please know that you are not alone. So many of us struggle with shame and guilt without knowing why we even feel them, but they always seem to be prevalent in our life. And what's worse, we don't even know how to get rid of them. But what if your shame and guilt aren't even yours to bear, and simply accepting that idea meant that you could let them go? Stay tuned to find out more.
Welcome to the Human Narrative Podcast, where we share stories that resonate amongst us all.
Welcome back to the podcast, my friends. I am your host, Clark Webb, and today we're going to talk about a narrative that I know everyone knows: shame and guilt. But instead of talking about it, I'm going to tell you a story about it, and it goes like this. There once was a young man shrouded in a heavy blanket. He had no idea where the blanket came from. He only knew that the blanket had been with him his entire life. He often studied the blanket, and one day he realized it was not a blanket at all, though it was a quilt. And he came to realize that there were patches of stories that were woven into the quilt's fabric and panels. They were not stories of joy, however, but ones of supposed wrongdoings and subsequent journeys laden with guilt. The young man recalled the quilt being light at one point, perhaps in his childhood, but as he had aged, it had slowly gotten heavier and heavier, not with the stories of others, but with the addition of his own, because he'd been led to believe that he had to carry the quilt and add to it, but he felt that something was amiss and it was not his burden, yet he could not throw it off. Not yet, at least. Around the same time, there was also a young woman who was hobbled by a long and winding chain. As far back as she could recall, it had always been connected to her, but she did not remember a time when she asked for it or agreed to its weight. The chain had just always been with her, and almost kind of like part of her. She would pull and pull on it from time to time, hoping to find the end, but never to any avail. She would study the links, looking for a weak spot in one of them, but she could never find a fissure that promised the chain could be broken. In all of her searching of the chain's links, she eventually came to notice that each one was a deep scarlet color, and if she looked deep enough, it was as if she could see a pulsing light deep within each of the scarlet links. If she closed her eyes and pressed her ear to each link, there were even times when she felt she could hear whispers of laughter, slander, mockery, and remorse. She didn't know why those specific words always came to mind, but every time she heard them, she was filled with a deep shame. She wanted to be done with these thoughts and feelings, but she didn't know how to throw the chain off. Not yet, at least. Separately, the young man and the young woman continued their journeys, aware of the burdens that they carried, but unaware that the answer to their freedom was much closer than they could ever anticipate. Until one day when they both arrived at a wall too tall to climb over and too long to go around. There was, however, an open archway, and the answer seemed simple enough, but each time they tried to step through the archway, they were unable to cross its threshold. The young man's quilt would weigh him down to the point he felt frozen to the ground, and the young woman's chain would grow taut and unyielding. In despair and frustration, they cursed the wall. They were so close to touch it, yet it was so far away. It was so large and looming, but they never were getting any closer. They were trapped. They were stuck. They felt that they were mired by the burdens that grew heavier every day. And so they cursed the burdens that they had never wanted, but somehow had adopted, these burdens that prevented them from tasting a freedom they could feel was so close, yet was so far away. And so they collapsed in self-pity, and they cried to the sky for an answer. And they said, "What must I do to be rid of this? I just want to be on the other side." And at that moment appeared a small bird out of nowhere. It flitted around the young man and woman to gain their attention, and then it darted towards the wall, gently landing above the archway. As if the vertical wall was horizontal, it danced about, as if gravity held no sway over it. The young man and woman were mesmerized by this sudden, unexpected company, and what a small sight it was. It was a woodpecker-looking bird, but smaller than they imagined one could be. It had a brown body with a mix of striped and dotted plumage, There were splashes of lavender along its neck and yellow under its tail, but the most startling detail was the red, the most beautiful red they had ever seen along the back of its neck and head. It was perhaps the most beautiful creature they had ever laid eyes on. As if it was flattered by their attention, the little bird appeared to bow and then began to do the most unexpected thing. It began to peck at the stone above the archway. At first, its pecking was tentative and slow, as if it was feeling out the density of the stone and guessing where to peck. Eventually, however, it appeared to gain confidence as its small head and beak picked up speed with a determination beyond belief for a creature so small. Its head whirred, its beak chipped and flicked, dust flew off, and, to the surprise of the young man and woman, letters began to take shape. As time went on, words began to take shape, and after much commotion and mess, the little bird appeared to finally finish its task, and then began to wash the wall in words, in essence, with the wind of its tiny flapping wings. And as the dust cleared and settled, this is what the young man and woman saw. 3 words: surrender, believe, let go. And as they both uttered the final word, let go, the bird landed on their shoulders and began to hop and dance its way down their arms until it rested upon one of their hands. And then it tapped each finger one by one, looking up into their eyes between each tap. It would tap, and then it would cock its head as if waiting for an obvious response. The young man and woman were so confused at first, but as they thought about the words, and as the bird patiently and gently tapped each knuckle over and over and over, they finally understood. The burdens they carried. They were not bound to the quilt and chain, nor were the quilt and chain bound to them. Their hands simply clasped something which could have been released at any time. But now was the time. Not yesterday, not tomorrow, now. And so they surrendered, they believed, and they let go. And at that moment, they did not go to the wall, but it came to them. And in the blink of an eye, they were on the other side of the archway looking back. They could see their journey and how far they had come. They could see the quilt and chain laying in the dust, already collecting dust, and they could see what it all meant. The guilt and shame they had felt for so long was finally behind them. And while it had been part of their journey, it was not their journey. It was theirs, but it had never been theirs. And while they felt it had been their burden to carry for so long, it was no longer their burden to shoulder. No more. The time of guilt and shame was over, and the young man and the young woman were grateful for all of it as they turned and stepped towards their future. All right, listeners, so that is the end of the story. But before you go, I want you to think about a few things. Guilt and shame represent the past, and many of us not only live in the past, but we are stuck in the past. Thus, we hold on to the shame and guilt of the past because, honestly, we're probably afraid of the here and now. We're afraid of today. Now, if any of this resonates with you, perhaps you're holding on to remnants of the past because you believe you don't deserve to move on. Maybe somehow you believe or have been made to believe you deserve to suffer, and therefore you allow the shame and guilt of the past to define and control you. Or maybe you're just simply afraid of what tomorrow will bring if you allow yourself to be free of all of it. But, my friends, we all deserve to be free of the past, especially shame and guilt that may or may not be ours to carry. Of course, we can learn from the past without forgetting it. We can honor the past without reliving it, and we can even recall the past without it holding any sway over us. So, if you feel stuck in life and you're not sure how to get past whatever wall is holding you back, consider what past guilt and shame you may be holding on to. It's time for you to put it down and let it go. It's time for you to heal. It's time for you to step into tomorrow free of the burden you've carried for so long. You deserve to be free, and you deserve so much more. So there you have it, my friends. That is the narrative for the day, and I'm sticking with it. Much love and much life until the next episode. I appreciate you. I appreciate your time. And I really appreciate you supporting this podcast, The Human Narrative. I can't wait to bring you more valuable episodes, so talk to you next week. Bye.